women today expect a man to be emotionally intelligent, expect the man to be spiritually awakened, expect the man to bring them money, expect the man to do the dishes, expect the man to be equal in the partnership. Now, there's a massive gap.
Firmer figures knows your money, cuts down on strife. Time to trust your future. Firmer figures, love your life.
My guest today is going to take you on a journey. If his story of trauma in his childhood, shame, fleeing a war-torn homeland, does not inspire you to create a better life for yourself, then I don't know what will. He helps people accelerate their growth, achieve excellence in all of the 8 areas of life: spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, business, money, relationship, and self-love, and maximize their human and business potential. As a business consultant, he globally provides answers to questions and practical solutions to life's challenges in talks, workshops, seminars, one-to-one coaching retreats, articles, radio, TV interviews, as well as his books. Tony is no stranger to the media, appearing in various magazines including Soul and Spirit, Migrant Women, Accelerate Your Business, Changing Careers magazine, Your Wellness, and Time Out. Not to mention his TV and radio shows and appearances on ABC, CBS, Fox and NBC. His vision is to reach, educate, awaken the hearts and elevate the minds of, get this, 1 billion people. He's known for creating amazing transformation and leaving his clients feeling balanced, inspired and peaceful. And that is how you will feel after listening to the wonderful Tony J Selimi. Now, Tony, first of all, before we go any further, I had the pleasure, and thank you very much, of listening to, I haven't finished it yet, but I'm going to, the audio version of your book, Hashtag Loneliness.
Amazing.
No, seriously. I didn't expect to. And you know what it is? You live in a world where, you know, without sounding too, I now know a lot of people who have written books, and a lot of us did them together, and it was something that was a big thing for all of us to become an author. And you always believe that what you're right, because there's no new information, it's interpretation. So I'm a big proponent about shame, loneliness and stress. And I had the pleasure of having the world's #1 expert on stress related illnesses and how stress is affecting us globally a few weeks ago. And she talks about it from a scientific point of view. And then you come along, you talk about it from every point of view, going spiritually. But what was fascinating, and I would rather hear you tell it, but if you could tell people your beginnings, because if people understand what your real beginnings were, and I'm talking, I haven't ever asked anybody this actually, from childhood. What was absolutely amazing about the audiobook is, number one, it was done by a woman, and she was speaking as a young boy. And obviously, you know, women sound like young boys when they do voiceovers. So it's almost as if you were transported back to Macedonia, and this little boy is talking to you. It's eerie. Almost.
Thank you for sharing that.
It is so, and I'm like, and you can feel this little boy and what he's. So in your words, Tony, tell us a little bit about this boy and how it was the beginnings of the absolutely amazing career you have now, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But I think people will not grasp the enormity of your journey without understanding that.
I come from a very small town called Gostivar in Western Macedonia, and I come from a very humble beginnings. My parents were restaurateurs. Like many families in the world at that time, they worked extremely hard to educate us. I'm one of 6. I'm the youngest child of 6, and I came into this world almost with a disability. And I had crooked legs, which prevented me from walking for almost 3 to 4 years. So I used to observe the world from stillness, but also from that desire to be able to play and being able to do things other children could do and I couldn't. And also observing the pain of my mother of having to, on one hand, work extremely hard in the restaurant with my father to provide us, but on the other hand, trying to educate us, trying to maintain 6 children around her. And I remember very strongly the pain I used to go through when she would put me in a cot and, you know, tie my legs, because back then we didn't really have access to physiotherapy and all the modern medicine we have today. So I can recall the screams that I used to have when she would tie me very tight to straighten my legs. Without realizing that, you know, she's doing her best to give me a better future. Now, as that happened and I started walking, I remember my sisters, my grandparents taking me both on their hands, and almost I was walking like a ballerina on a tiptoe, making the first steps. I started to feel the joy of what it means to experience the world with your own legs, and being able to walk and being able to do things that I observed for almost 3 years other children do. And I always felt very fortunate to have my parents, to have a big family, and the support that is required for have a very healthy foundation of who you are meant to become one day. After that experience of literally being born into this world with something that it's not your own fault, I went through something that kept me shameful, and I carried a guilt throughout my life about being abused, sexually abused by somebody who used to work for my father. Now, that created tremendous inner shame that I developed this fear of being myself. I developed the fear of going to dark places. I developed the guilt that I had done something wrong. And I lived with that guilt almost 20 years, feeling that it was me who was meant to be punished. It was me who was meant to be reprehended, and it was me who's done something wrong. And this was all done under the noses of my parents without them ever really knowing, because of the circumstances in which all of this happened. Now, having overcome that, and I go into more details in the book that you are listening at the moment, into the audiobook, I was struck by an illness at the age of 10. So it was almost like struggle was my life throughout all of my early years. And adversity kept hitting me. Almost after I would overcome one challenge, the next one was just there waiting for me. So during this period, I ended up in hospital with my lungs failed and multiple illnesses that I ended up being into life support machine for almost more than 6 months. And my parents were given a notice saying that I will die. There's no way this person can make it into this world. So my mother took ownership. She called my father. This happened when I was in Macedonia, not in Bosnia, where my parents had their business. And they took me to the main state hospital, but also they took me to the spiritual healers and teachers who once told my mother, my father, my grandmother, when I was born, that I would become a master healer globally, inspiring people and be able to heal people's hearts and minds and souls. And my mother went to them and said, okay, well, what happened to the prediction? He's dying. And, you know, the old man started laughing. He said, that's just a test for him. He will survive. And fast forward 6 months down the line, I started really feeling better, being taken from hospitals to a very old house in the mountains to see a man who never been to university, never really studied science, but whatever he was doing, I could feel that I'm getting better and better and better and better. So it is at this time that really I awoke myself the curiosity to really understand why the spiritual side of our life is so neglected, and the power of the healing that happens in that realm that we currently do not see with our own eyes. And how come the medical science, on the other hand, told my parents I will die? But when the two came together, I started getting better and better into perfect health. So I really started wondering about why life is the way it is. I always never felt comfortable in the place where I was born. I literally felt I was an outsider. It's, I would observe the world from an outsider point of view. I never felt safe in that space. Although I had great parents, I had a great family, I had a great farm life and all of that. But I used to observe the suffering, first of all, of my mother being physically, mentally, and emotionally abused by men, but also about other women in the society and other children. And I just simply disagreed that this is the way we should live our lives. It was just this drive inside of me that said, okay, you are here to do something greater than that. And at that age, I also started repairing TVs and radios, and I've never went to school. I just learned. I don't know where I learned it from. I just learned how to repair. So I became the go-to person to repair technology. And I remember, I share this in my first book also a bit about Path to Wisdom, when my father brought the first color TV, that nobody in Macedonia had a color TV, and how all the children came into our house just to observe a phenomena that we've actually experienced. And this is not really a long time ago. Mm. So I remember how all of that impacted me to be able to become an excellent student in learning science, study math, study biology, human biology, but also study life in general and study computers. And I always had this dream about traveling through universe and really understanding space. And I've never watched a Star Trek movie. We didn't even have the Star Trek movies, so I didn't even know where those dreams were coming to me. All I knew is I would have conversations with God from a very young age, asking for help. And then when I wouldn't receive the answer, I would justify God in a way that there are many other people out there who would suffer more than I do, so therefore I don't really need that help. And when the time would arrive, he will save me. And truthfully, on the many occasions when that happened, I was just always humble, saying, God does listen. No matter whether we personify God as an entity or through religion as different entities, I believe in one universal intelligence that maybe we call it God, or maybe it's something else we currently don't know yet. But I always remember that inner strength and trust in something bigger than myself and bigger than humanity and bigger of the pain I used to observe, not just only in me, but in others, that there is there to guide us into the right direction for us to be able to bring our own intelligence out there and to change the lives of other people. So it's sort of the next stages took me into me constantly thinking, I have manuals for repairing every single piece of technology, but I always wonder why my mother doesn't have a manual when I got ill, and why people don't have manual when they are born so they can read and they can learn from it. How to live their lives, how could really face their adversity, and how could they really navigate through an ocean of emotions that we start to build throughout our lives through different experiences, and be able to really remain in our hearts and be able to remain grateful and being able to see the light in the middle of darkness. Because it's very easy for us to lose our way when we are in the dark. It's very easy for us to judge outwardly when we are painfully inside. It's very easy for us to succumb to fear when we lose our trust. So I wanted to create a life manual. And the other thing I wanted to really create, I wanted to become an architect and a pilot and a and a heart surgeon. Those are the things I always wanted since I was a kid. Now, having experienced that turbulence with my health and coming back into perfect health, just as I started to enjoy that freedom again of being healthy and being grateful for my body, mind, and soul being healed, I went into high school where I was the only person of my own nationality and ethnic origin in that school. And I ended up being bullied for 4 years. So I experienced tremendous bullying in there as well, without really understanding what bullying is, because back then we didn't really have Google, somebody to teach us what bullying is and what are those emotions and guilt and shame, and how to really look after ourselves and how we can really overcome those challenges. And equally, we did not have the freedom to speak to our parents, to be able to express our emotions, to be able to express our pain and stuff like that. So I grew up in a very strict family, meaning you don't speak to your parents unless you are being asked. And it was the same. My father was like that with his father. My mother was like that with her parents. So we had tremendous respect and love and connection in the family. But the downside of it was we created many facades in ourselves without being freely able to express
yourself,
what we feel within. So having really gone through that stages in high school of through bullying and through living apart from my parents, because my parents lived in Bosnia and I was in Macedonia studying at one of the top math schools in former Yugoslavia. I literally, this all pain and everything that was happening to me gave me this tremendous power within me to really be even more determined, to even more succeed, to even study more, and actually be one of the best students in that school. And having graduated from there, I got a place at the university in Zagreb, one of the top engineering universities in Europe. But as I started in there, the civil war broke out. So it's like, it's been that turbulence. One test, you just enjoy the part after overcoming certain adversity, then suddenly before you can turn the face on the other side and being able to say, oh my God, I had a year or two of enjoying my life, the next adversity hits you. And, civil war was something that I was conscripted from university into joining a former Yugoslav army against my own will. And being able to fight in a war that I despised. And this is not a war outside an enemy, but this is a war of facing your friends, your family, the country you were born into. So it was a very difficult period that destabilized my entire being, but also a time where I lost a lot of family, friends, and everything I knew, which led me to being homeless on the streets of London. So on one hand, feeling lucky that as a teenager, I ended up in a safe country such as UK, but on the other hand, leaving behind everything I grew up to be.
So how does, and I'm going to go into more detail in how you made that transition from homeless on the streets of London, which blows your mind when you think about it now. But one thing that struck me of what I know of you, we're talking a child who has lived with abuse, bullying, great illness, terminal, if you listen to the medical profession. Yeah. But something struck me that you, there was a point where you said, despite all of that, I still knew I was lucky. How does someone who, people go through much less and give up? Mm-hmm. Is it something that you think is inherently in you as a person? Mm-hmm. Or do you think your experiences, for want of a better word, toughened you up?
I believe it's a mixture of the two, Georgette. And every human being who comes into this world is equipped with the most sophisticated technology and intelligence known to mankind. Now, the difference is some of us, we might have the experiences that leads us to awakening that intelligence from within ourselves. Now, there are many factors that contribute towards people's awakening process. Unfortunately, also I've gone through stages in my life where I even considered to commit suicide. And I think at some point while you're listening to #loneliness, the book, you will see why. And I also know that many people around the world who suffer with mental health issues, they suffer with emotional issues, they suffer with relationship issues, they suffer from, health and family and financial problems that impact the way this intelligence is awakened or put to sleep. So I believe that the environment, the experiences that person has in that environment, the education that person has, and also the family background that that person has are all massive contributing factors whether you awaken that intelligence to get you out of those situations where you feel, I'm lucky to be alive, I'm lucky to have another breath, I'm lucky to be in England, even though it's on the streets of London with no food, with no money, I couldn't speak the language, I did not have friends, I didn't have a roof over my head, and I had no certainty about my life, no certainty about what will I ever see any member of my family. Now you can imagine that tremendous pain and uncertainty that a teenager experiences. And on top of that, the Home Office did not make it any easy for me to settle down. So they made it even more difficult as a refugee, as a asylum seeker coming from a civil destructive war zone where the whole world knew what happened. They made it very difficult for the journey of the transition for an 18, 19 years old boy to settle down in UK. So there are many circumstances that can potentially awaken or put to sleep forever the most amazing intelligence every human being possesses.
That's what I find fascinating. You've just put your finger right on it. Because as you're speaking, I'm thinking of people who I know have been through similar things, maybe one or two of them, and it has actually put to sleep what I think their greatness could have been.
Yeah.
And it's just, and it's funny because you talk about as well, when you were ill, the loneliness beginning there, that isolation. And funnily enough, because between you and me and all the rest of people listening, but secretly, my husband tells a very similar story.
Yeah.
When he was young, he suffered very badly from asthma, and he was off school a lot, missed a whole year of school because he was sick and be in a room, and he had, like you, big family, and he would say how he would be in that room by himself. And in those days, you didn't have a TV in your room, our age group. You had the radio if you were lucky, and he could hear the laughter and the talking downstairs and felt just completely apart from it, as if his being ill was a punishment and just being in that room. And it took years, even after, because I'm quite a upbeat kind of person, and I've had my traumas as well. But I took your attitude. Oh my gosh, just imagine. And I remember years ago, I remember saying to him, you have got to put that boy to sleep because he is still who you are. You meet him, and not long after knowing him, you will know that story. He's never put it away. He's always been that boy in that dark room listening to everybody laughing while he missed out. And I said, that little boy's followed you around. I actually said, you need to kill that child off. I said, I'm going to be mercenary. Kill that kid because he is sabotaging you. And he said, I've never heard, because we've been together a very long time, like going back 15, 20 years. And he said, I've never heard it put that way before. I said, because people pay you lip service. But I'd never really understood. I understood in my head the effect of these experiences. But when you see someone you care about live it, even though they're getting on with life in a normal way, but that little loneliness back in the day just kept on coming along, and it was as a present to him. And he'd always use it as a reason for something. Well, it's all right for you. You're popular. I was the one that was in the room by myself. And I'm thinking, that was like 30 years ago. You're not in that room anymore. But I didn't get it. So listening to what you speak about, when I thought, I did get it before, but you articulate it in such a way, especially like you say from childhood, because we like to think of children not going through these things. It's heartbreaking to hear your story. Actually, I'm not gonna lie, it really is. So I have to keep reminding me of who you are today.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it, is how, where you are today. So you're on the streets of London and you're homeless.
Yeah.
You've managed to get a job. You speak the language much better. And then a person who's all about the heart, all about the heart, goes into a job that is so technology based. How does that how does that happen? I mean, I know you did
Well,
your engineering degree, so there was obviously a gap before you became the Tony we know today. So how did that journey happen?
well, for the first 3 years when I arrived in this country, after I got my first job, and this was due to a woman from Macedonia who saw me on the streets of London, and we struck a conversation, and she realized that we are just 60 kilometers from the same place, far away, and equally our grandparents knew each other.
Oh wow, okay.
And she provided me 3 days of shower and room and linen and clean water and clean clothes, and helped me direct me to certain agencies where I could register for a job, and explained to me a few basic things about living in this country. And within 3 days, I got myself a job in an Italian restaurant, washing dishes and cleaning toilets and making sure the place was spotless, because I grew up with a mom who was spotless. So no matter where I would go, I would make everything spotless and shine, because I believe no matter what you do it with your heart and infuse love, no matter what job you do. So that was the beginning of my putting myself back into a home, because I found a job with living conditions. So I worked in an Italian restaurant where they provided me a room which is smaller than my kitchen, but I had a bed, I had a shower, and I had 3 meals a day to keep me really putting some weight on, because I could see my bones. It was very difficult sight when I used to have a shower to watch myself then, to watch myself now. And then I started having 3 other jobs, and I enrolled myself to learn English, and also I enrolled myself to learn English for business. And I wanted to continue with my education in engineering, because I was always fascinated about life and understanding the science and the maths and how that governs life and how that creates the fabric of our reality. So I started my higher national diploma at the Westminster College, and I graduated there with top honors and received few awards. And I talk about in Path to Wisdom and a bit in #loneliness how one of the lecturers, Mr. Dobson, when he saw I was one of the top maths and engineering students, he encouraged me to apply to some of the 4 top universities in UK. But I also recall our conversations we used to have together when I used to say to him, I'm nobody. Why would those, top universities would be interested in somebody like me? I don't have the wealth, I don't have the family, I don't have the support required for me to go and study in those places. And he literally broke these barriers in my head, that he sat me down and we actually filled all the UCAS forms, and we applied at UCL, Oxford, Cambridge, and Imperial College. And I got accepted in 3 of them.
Wow.
And then I started to think about the next problem, and the next problem was how I'm going to pay for this, because I wasn't eligible for free education, because I still didn't get my refugee status and all of that. It took almost 9 years for that to happen. So I went and I started 3 jobs. So basically I would work for breakfast. I would serve breakfast in different restaurants from 5 a.m., go to university, come back, and then I would work in other places in the evening. And then I would also work in nightclubs, and I would work as a retail assistant at Harvey Nicks. So I ended up working for the next 10 years to be able to educate myself. But throughout that period of time, I met so many amazing people who started directing me back into the spiritual world. And my first friend in this country, a woman called Lova, she is French Mauritius, living in London. She used to work at Aqua di Parma at Harvey Nicks, and I used to work for Mulberry. And I remember my first day
Ooh.
at my job at Harvey Nicks, the music was playing and we arrived early in the morning. There was nobody in there. It was about half an hour before the store was open. And I looked at her. It was almost this like spiritual connection that goes beyond anything you can explain. And I just offered my hand and I said, "Would you like to dance?" She smiled and said, "With pleasure." We started dancing together and we didn't even realize the store opened. And then everybody started clapping their hands, and we continued, and our friendship developed. But she was the one who started buying me books for healing, spiritual intelligence, and bringing me back into what I was being groomed from a very young age by many of the spiritual teachers and the Sufi sect my parents belonged to. So by that time, I had lost a lot of faith in everything that I believed due to the tremendous pain and the experiences I had to go through. I had lost faith in humanity for seeing the war continuing back at home for almost 10 years. But what Lova did for me was started to balance me out while I'm having this pain trying to survive. She was feeding me with buying me books that were nurturing my mind. But also she started really the process of, she paid for a couple of healers for me to see. And when I remember a healer named David, I went to see in Victoria in a tiny little office. And, when I walked in, I usually walked in with a very defensive energy. And I know that because my grandfather used to teach me a lot of healing techniques. So I would create walls around me to survive. And he looked at me and he said, "Oh my God, I've never seen such a young boy with such a tremendous healing powers." And I went to him and I said, "Okay," I said, "tell me something I don't know. You're telling me things I do know."
So you've gotten over being a nobody now then, Tony. I see.
Yeah.
I see you're over that.
But the thing what happened in there, he told me 3 things that truly nobody knew. And one of them was the abuse, which up to then I never dealt with. And there was no soul that knew about anything like that. And I said, okay, this guy is for real. And that started me going for more and starting really in parallel to me studying engineering, becoming top students and starting my degree at UCL. I always loved people and I always wanted to know what is the technology behind us. That's why I studied engineering, because we engineering everything we see. So therefore, all of that wisdom, everything we see in the world comes from within us. It's not from outside of us. So therefore, I wanted to understand what we create as a reflection of what we have inside of ourselves. And science and maths and studying physics and mathematics, engineering, and at the same time, human behavior and organizational behavior helped me to try and link the two of them. This then led me to working in the technology sector and creating a very successful IT career for almost 15 years until the financial crisis happened in 2008, 2009.
Same.
And it wasn't about being made redundant. It was the way I was being treated through that process. And not just me, but almost like 40% of people who lost their job during that process were treated in a way that was ruthless, without ever considering how this person will pay their bills, whether they have somebody to care for, whether they have credit cards, how they're going to pay their mortgage and living costs. But the other disappointment came in when I actually, for the first time, went into the so-called benefit system that people in this country have this illusion that immigrants from around the world come to use that. I realized that having paid into the system for 19 years, I was only entitled to 65 quid a week. So, I did the maths because I'm a mathematician. And I said, the maths do not add up. And I remember like literally taking that paper at the local job center, and in front of the person, I just teared it down and I said, you know what, with all of my skills and 19 years of knowledge and wisdom and investment in myself, I am shocked that I'm being told by the very same system I've supported for 20 years that I entitled 65 quid to pay my mortgage, to live, and to do everything I'm doing. And that's below any poverty standards you will ever see.
Mm.
So I didn't want to be part of that. I wanted to say, okay, what is it I can do to make a change in the world? What is it I can do to inspire people if they go through that situation so they do not feel redundant, but they can take their intelligence and create businesses to support other people, and therefore bring their greatness back, awaken their greatness back, instead of feeling you are useless. Because that's the feeling that happens to many people when somebody tells you you don't have a job.
Yeah.
And then it's not like, there were so many articles written, so many politicians talking about that people don't want to work. It was not really true, because everyone I met, including myself, I went for almost a year writing 2,000 to 3,000 personal letters to jobs that probably never existed. So there was a whole lies that media and government were spreading that there are jobs. No, they weren't jobs. Everybody was getting rid of people. Nobody was employing people, especially during the 2008, 2009 era. So many people ended up in this vortex of problems and emotions and unhealthy, toxic environment. And it is through this time that I literally wanted to break free from the corporate world and technology, not because I don't love technology. I adore technology for some of the reasons. And then I think we need to shift in other ways, because technology can be both good and dangerous. I just wanted to remove myself and say, having spent so much time, energy, and money in my personal development, because, through all these years while I was working in technology, I continued with my personal development. I spent 7 years studying Tony Robbins and studying some of the top masters in the world, and working with healers and spiritual teachers such as Martin Brofman, Barbara Brennan, Dr. John DeMartini, John of God in Brazil. So I literally started working and learning from some amazing people who are living an amazing life, doing good for the planet. Because we tend to have this idea about money that, money is evil. And you know what? If we start being polarized in a way that we see our disempowered selves not to receive money, then we start thinking like that. But if we tap into our true greatness, we are money-making machine. Every human being is a money-making machine. Every human being has the same capacity to earn as anybody out on the planet. It took me 20 years to realize that.
And imagine with your knowledge and experience, how hard it is. I mean, the thing I see a lot, and obviously because I deal with a lot of successful people, and George, can you help me figure out this with my money or figure that out? Sometimes it's just a case of putting things in black and white, but as you know, that tends to lead to, I find in the conversations more and more, it's very difficult to separate the business from the personal, because they are so entwined. And particularly if you're in the entrepreneurial space, you're now worrying about not just paying bills with one set of money, you're juggling one set of finances and another. And I come across so many people who are 6 figures, maybe even into 7, but their personal life does not reflect that at all. And I'm totally, fit into that bracket, on and off, on and off, on and off. Major debts, get rid of it, because I had the knowledge, but my emotions always sabotage that. So I know exactly what to do. My only advantage was, because I knew what to do, I could get out of trouble quickly. But some people get in that and they're stuck. And I realized it wasn't about how much money they were making, because they just kept making more. I would go into some of their accounts and do stuff, and I would just see like their PayPal account just pop, 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 money, just dropping in willy-nilly. And at the other end of the spectrum, gosh, I can't get this bill paid this month and I've got no savings. And I'm thinking, what? How does this? And these are people who have profiles. And I realize that the profile, I mean, I'm doing a series at the moment, a show called Publicly Rich, Privately Poor, when the persona is one thing, and it's not because there's anything wrong with them or their intelligence, but something in there is saying, I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy. And then we're going on Facebook and we're looking to get inspiration. And by the time you come off Facebook, you're so demotivated, because everybody seems to be doing, and it's double-edged sword. So someone comes to you and they're
Yeah.
experiencing something like that, and we are in that world because we're all trying to make our own living as opposed to being
Yeah.
employed. Where do you start to um give us a session, Tony? Help us out here. How Where do you start to sort of try and tap into just a little bit about what's going on?
Okay, I can share with you my recent client coaching session, and this is by a very powerful man in the city. Now, he's not like any ordinary man, but he's somebody who's making 8-figure salary, but making 9 and 10 figures for the business in the city.
Mhm.
Now, he was referred to me by an existing client. So I went, and I usually book people for 2 to 4 hours consultation, depend whether it's a full business and full 360-degree view of their life, or is it just about specific issue, and we go through a clarity coaching session to see why they would like to invest in a high-end coach with the knowledge that I have to help people in 8 key areas of life. Now, when we started the conversation, I was listening for about 20 minutes of what his problems were. But then as I listened, I realized instantly you mentioned the word you mentioned was a low self-worthiness. Now, low self-worthiness can be embedded like a virus into your entire persona. Now, when a person who's at very high top end is already making an 8-figure income, for them, they don't really think about where they were. What they think about, it's about how can they make the 10-figure income for themselves, because they've done it already for the business, but now they want to shift over and saying, how can I create that? So he wanted me to coach him how to create not 1 billion, but 100 billion pounds.
Okay.
Okay. Now, that can give you a bit of understanding the kind of clients that I work and the client challenges that they have. And then the first question I asked him, I said, do we have 100 billion people in the world? And he said, no. So I said, we having 7.5 billion people in the world, and you want to create an income which is 100 billion, which means for every human being on the planet, you have to get them to spend at least 100,000. 7 billion people. Is that possible? No. I said, okay. So I'm not saying that I cannot help you create that, but what I'm saying is the traditional methods you're trying to create that wealth is not gonna work. So I took him through a process of being able to understand what kind of work and products he can create to realize his vision. So you being immersed into your own life, it requires a very clean mirror and somebody with a great intelligence of that mirror to be able to extract it out of you and present it to you in a way that makes it understandable for you how you can achieve your financial goals. Or when I have a clients who they feel they are extremely worthy and they tell me, I'm worth $1 billion. And then I'm asking them, do you have $1 billion in bank account? No. Do you have 100,000? No. Do you have $1 billion? No. So I said, how much do you have? How much are you making? 65,000. But you just told me you're worth $1 billion. So I said, a person who tells me they're worth $1 billion, they already have it in the bank account. So I said, we have to bridge the gap of that worthiness or the unworthiness you have inside, which prevents you from receiving that billion. And for me, every human being is priceless. That's what my name means in translation. Tony J Selimi means living your life in peace is priceless. That's in Latin. Tony means priceless. Yeton in Albanian means living your life, and Selimi in Arabic means peace.
Peaceful.
So I take the clients to try to understand those deep-rooted blocks and emotional blocks, as well as mind blocks and beliefs and values that prevents them from really attracting the wealth they require. Now, wealth in this world, it's extremely important if you want to really deliver a global vision mission. It is important if you want to have meaning and purpose in life. It is important if you want to have family and relationship. It is important for you to be educated. It's important for you to travel. It's important for you to feed yourself. It's important for you to create products and services that you can bring your intelligence to the world. And if all of that we can assess, it's important. Why do we say the money is evil? Because there'll be some deep-rooted belief of pain that happens in the body that you associate the two, and you keep repeating that like a story. So what I do with my clients, I interrupt those stories. And then I challenge them there and there until they recognize it with tears of inspiration, how one single belief or one single value prevents them from them reaching that outcome. And we are complex beings. And therefore, for me, it's sort of my own methodology that I've created in a path to wisdom. It's a unique methodology in the world. So if I wanted to be a billionaire and change the lives of 1 billion people, I had to create a methodology that 1 billion people can use. Now, when you can help 1 billion people resolve personal, professional, business, spiritual problems, the billion becomes very easy reachable target. You just need to create an amazing plan to support you with that. And this is what helped me then. 2 years ago, I introduced a very unique program, 5 days program to work with me privately called Vital Planning for Elevated Living, which I take my clients through an amazing process to really establish all of this, clarify their values, clarify their mission, their vision, look at their entire life as one entity and extract the wisdom out of that and create that a unique business unique to my client. So
and how does that manifest itself on I'm going to get linear now as opposed to spiritual. How does that manifest itself in a subtle change? If I was sat in front of you and you took me through maybe a day of your process, what are the first signs that you would see in me that something is taking? How does that manifest itself in a tangible way?
In a tangible way, the first thing, you will feel inspired. You will live the day with me with a tremendous clarity about who you are and what you're here to do, what is your true blockages within yourself, and a clear roadmap and a strategies for you to be able to take the next steps safely. So majority of my clients, actually all of my clients, their energy, their vibration starts shifting. It's like their daily processes start changing. Because I consult both private clients and business clients, the reality is what you said earlier on, we are one unit. I don't separate my private life or personal life. You can find everything on my personal Facebook about me, personally, and about my business and everything I share. Now, as you start bringing that clarity within, as you start connecting your inner being and start synchronizing your body, mind, your heart, and your emotion and your soul to work in unity, you start transcending many of the things that prevented you from really accessing and awakening that intelligence. And you start being ruled by the outer world, and you become a master of the outer world and an outer reality of who you are. But you must learn to navigate through your inner reality first, to be able to master your mind, to be able to master your emotions, to be able to master the intelligence of the body as one system that works together. Now, the first thing I notice with my clients is every sentence I help them purify the words, their beliefs, their values. Because every word, every experience, every belief holds millions of information behind what people speak. Majority of people, they're not aware of that. So I'm extremely deep listener now to understand the intelligence that comes from unspoken words behind the spoken words.
See, when you notice I'm very quiet, Tony. See, notice I'm not saying much.
Yeah. So there are many habits, there are many expressions like facial expressions, body expression, the way people speak, the tonality of their voice, the way the problems are happening in their lives, the way their illness works with them, and how the illness is there simply a vehicle of communication from our inner intelligence to our front conscious awareness to say, wake up. But most people are not being taught this at school. They're not taught by their environment. They're not taught by their parents. So most people start at some point their personal, spiritual, business development journey, either through massive pain and a shock to the system, or simply from boredom.
Yeah. And talk about going back to your book and how it all came about. I mean, I think loneliness is huge, and what I've seen in recent times, and you'll know better than I whether this is a recent thing, is just because it's just my awareness of it, in the increase in isolation of men and older men, middle age, at the time when they should be enjoying the fruits of their labours, have worked hard. You explained it earlier when you said about the recession at that time. Imagine someone who had a family at that time,
Yep.
and then everything about their self-esteem plummets. But I see a lot of it has manifested itself in, my brother-in-law, he's passed away now, but I remember him saying there was a time he would leave work on a Friday, go home, and until he left, this is after they'd been divorced, he would go home, and the next conversation he would have, unless somebody tried to, the hawker came to the door or something, would be when he left on the Monday morning to go back to work. And he pretty much could go that whole weekend and not communicate with another person, because he was no longer at the age when you went down the pub or you socialise in that way. He did his work, he came home, watched television, and it looks normal, but slowly but surely these people are becoming more and more distanced from the world. I don't know how best to put it.
Yeah.
How do you combat that? And it's not just men, of course, but I think obviously from a woman point of view, I always grew up looking at men as the leaders, because that's how
Yep.
the time I was brought up in, and there's been a shift. And women, we travel in packs, so we're having a bad day. I'm having a bad day. I've had enough of this. Bev, I'm on my way around. Men don't tend to do that as much, but a lot of women don't either. So how do you navigate out of that to even get that self-esteem? Because some people won't even come to someone like you, even if you were in their price range, because it's a big step to ask for help if you can't even take small steps by
Yes,
yourself. So
absolutely.
how do you take those small steps by yourself to even begin the journey?
Well, one of the things is there are many different reasons why people don't take that step. And each reason is individual to that person. But recently I wrote an article on LinkedIn about mental health in men.
Oh my God.
Now, despite the fact that the world has been very favorable for men for thousands of years, men face a whole new set of challenges in the 21st century when we have a rise of women intelligence into the world, where women start having the same powers and as men. However, for me, it's not about man or woman, because I believe gender is irrelevant when it comes to understanding the intelligence of the soul and intelligence of who we are. Gender is just something that separates people in a physical reality, but every human being has even the chromosomes of each gender in their DNA makeup. So when you start working with both genders, and I work with both genders, irrelevant who they are. If I'm working with men, men are very different to women. Why? Because men have been robbed away their emotional intelligence, because for centuries they were expected to be the providers, expected to go to work, bring the money, or hunt and bring the food, and the woman will look after the children. But that role is no more valid for any man on the planet. And therefore, women today expect a man to be emotionally intelligent, expect the man to be spiritually awakened, expect the man to bring them money, expect the man to do the dishes, expect the man to be equal in the partnership. Now, there's a massive gap that needs to be filled in there. And I see the men who work with me become extremely great at multitasking, at being able to talk to a woman in a way that woman will fall in love with them instantly. Perhaps maybe it's because of my struggle, my personal struggle with my sexuality, that helped me become extremely close to both genders and understand the reality of both needs of the both genders, that I can actually bring people together or help people separate in a loving way without causing more pain if they are already together. This is what I say to people, because men require tremendous support to be able to understand and vocalize their emotions and vocalize their needs. for women, it's very easy to vocalize their stuff. You see women in a group of, in an environment, they will chit chat instantly about everything.
Yeah.
But men are, you know, handicapped when it comes to emotionally having a conversation with another human being, because they still have that stigma of shame, stigma of, you know, if you are anywhere emotionally intelligent, they consider you as weak. And this is what I have experienced throughout my life, because I always connected with women and always was a high achiever, whether it's at school, whether it's through problems, whether it's in restaurants I worked, whatever I did, I always been more emotionally intelligent than the rest of men around me. And maybe because my soul chose this journey to be a thought leader in the world and teach people and become a teacher that a lot of people nowadays write and tell me about how they feel inspired through the work I do. But the truth is, women have always had the emotional intelligence, and they've just been building on that and getting bigger and bigger. So therefore, now the gap has become bigger of men and women to be able to come into a dialogue and not see each other as man or a woman, but as two unified souls having a sharing like we do right here, right now. And I believe if every man were educated at this level, we would have much more harmony on the planet. But also I promote women in leadership. I believe we need more women, but not power-hungry women, because they can be extremely destructive, like, for instance, what's happening in France now. But a woman who is basically driven through their heart as an equal to another human being, not as an equal in gender. There's a different energy when I see women who go out there in personal development, spiritual development, business development, who have this desire to, you know, I'm going to take the world over and women should be this. No, 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 no. I'm not talking that kind of leadership. I'm talking heartfelt leadership that comes from a goddess inside without thinking she's a competition to a man.
Yeah.
Or to humanity or whatever it might be, but bringing her intelligence in a way that nurtures. Women are nurturers, like it or not. A woman energy can nurture you beautifully, but most women don't know how to access that. You know, recently we just finished filming of a documentary called Living My Illusion, and this is a real life story of two business people that came for help to me, people who run a very, very successful business. And I remember when one of the clients, the male client, when he started working with me, he had tremendous fears. Although on the outside he appeared so successful, on the inside he was crumbling. And I saw it in the first session. And we had our session at the Savoy Hotel. And then when I met his wife, the moment I looked into her eyes, I knew she was hiding a deep sadness. Despite the amazing image that most people would admire, any straight man, so-called, or a gay man, frankly, it does not matter, to have that reality and that amazing reality around them, will feel like, oh my God, I'm so lucky to have this. But when people experience separation from within, and they've been hiding for so long the problems, it will eventually impact everybody around them.
Yeah.
So when the client started working with me, I said to him, if you work with me and your wife doesn't work with me, I will guarantee you a divorce. Because you will start becoming more emotionally intelligent to understand the controlling nature and the dramas are happening, and we will be able to voice your feelings and then make a decision once you voiced it. And I said, if you both work with me, I will help you resolve your inner problems and honor your truth. And now, if what you're telling me, which I don't believe in the first instance, that your love is so powerful, then that love will be elevated to a whole new level of awareness, making you the most powerful, loving couple on the planet. But if it's not, you will separate. This is before they even started coaching with me on that consultation. And fast forward 18 months down the line, they separated with love, with no lawyers, with no problems, with stuff. Yes, they had to go through emotion, but that inspired them to invest and create a documentary, a real life documentary called Living My Illusions, to bring the powerful teachings that I have to the whole world, because there are so many people living in distress, in fear of whether it's money, whether it's security, finances, and they stay with the wrong partners, and impacting their health, impacting their energy, impacting their business, impacting their lifestyle, impacting everything around them, including their own children. But they remain disempowered in a relationship. For me, a relationship is two people where they bring their intelligence together and say, let's go create and bring amazing experiences. And yes, the relationship will have its own challenges, but how do we deal with one another when those challenges happen is what makes this relationship successful or not.
Oh, no. And speaking of successful, tell me how you managed to end up on the couch next to Brian Tracy. Having said that, just segue. How does a boy in war-torn was it, who comes over, doesn't speak the language, and now, not that I'm jealous or anything, can you see that in my body language and the tone of my voice, Tony, that, I am very envious. How did that come about? Just to bring us home and just really to put an umbrella over all your achievements. I'm not saying Brian Tracy's Barack Obama or maybe maybe he's up there. I don't know, but to many of us, in the business space, in terms of productivity and just getting off your butt, he was one of the forefathers.
Yeah,
to me,
absolutely.
Yeah, so just out of my celebrity. It's my celebrity wanting. How did that come about? So you got to he interviewed you. I should explain. Sorry.
Well, so far we've covered up quite a lot of my journey, and for me to reach really celebrity status, where people like Brian Tracy interview, it's a collective actions that happens on a daily basis, and you're not being in a sleep mode, but being in an awakened mode every single day, and do something every single day to realize your vision. So you're being ended up on major TV shows around America as well as around Europe wasn't really one thing. It was a accumulation of all the things that I have done in between to really reach the status. But equally, the greatest thing that happened is really publishing the 2 books. And especially #Loneliness, and the foreword was written by Dr. John DeMartini. And Dr. John DeMartini and Brian Tracy are close friends.
Oh,
and
that explains that one. But even even if they're
also,
those close friends, it doesn't mean that he would have had you unless he felt.
Absolutely.
You could bring value.
The first thing that he noticed was the foreword and the testimonial in front of the book. But also, in meantime, I've invested a lot of money into my own business and into my personal and spiritual development. Over the last 20 years, for almost 12 years, I shared earlier on that I worked 3 jobs to be able to afford my education and to be able to afford to go to seminars and talks and have a personal coach. For 20 years, I've always had a coach and always had a healer and a mentor in my life. So even if I couldn't afford it, I will make the actions to be able to afford it. So when I started working with Dr. John DeMartini, when he told me how much he charges per hour, I freaked out. I said, that's my entire salary. But I've made the decision, and I thank Virgin credit cards because I have a massive limit in there. Thanks, Richard. Yes,
thanks, Richard. You saved me.
And when I saw the talk, I saw that just after my sort of redundancy, and this is when I spent almost half of my redundancy money in buying online programs, which they just started really happening in the personal development industry back in 2009, 2010, that to help me fix myself. Because the pain was so big and I didn't want to go to the rock bottom I once knew. I said, there's no way I'm going to go back in there. There's no way. All of these years I worked so hard to be where I am that I'm going to let that be destroyed by one experience. So, I created this leap of faith when I went to see the talk, and then signed up to the seminar and had a session with DeMartini. And I think those were the £10,000, the most valuable money I didn't have spent. And then ever since, I've continued to grow with him, and he's my mentor, and I work quite closely with John. I do his seminars at his prophecy and his experience, which are literally all about becoming a polymath and overall understanding of life in general. So it's an amazing thing to have somebody who's really an amazing, clean mirror and somebody who's done the research and somebody who can bring it to you, and then you can learn it and then teach it globally. Now, when I created my first methodology, I worked with so many different people, and I spent 6 weeks in meditation. And being an engineer, I just integrated everything that I've learned, and I wanted to create something which is my baby, something which is mine, and something that can impact the lives of 1 billion people, something that can help unleash the wisdom of those 1 billion people. And this is where the TJ's evolutionary method was created, and I speak about in Path to Wisdom, my first book that became Amazon bestseller within a few months, ahead of Tony Robbins, ahead of Louise Hay, ahead of all these amazing personal development people that I learned from for 15 years. And it was massive inspiration and a boost of confidence that I'm on the right track. But having DeMartini writing the foreword and testimonials for both of my books, that was the culmination of my success, to have somebody who's living and breathing everything I desired right here, right now. So it gave me the awareness I required that there are people from humble beginnings who become great leaders and thought leaders in the world. It means that nothing can stop you to really realize your vision. And when you have a heartfelt desire to educate and help another human being, all the roads get opened up for you. The problem that I see in the personal and professional and business development industry, there's so much of polarization and ego-driven energy that it prevents people's heart to shine their own path.
That's so true, actually. And I had to correct myself on that, or learn that about myself, that when I started doing a lot of stuff, it was about I talk about money, as you know, but it was because everybody I spoke to or was in the space was make money, market, make money, money. And it was all about building a profile to then make more money, and build a profile to make more money. And there was very little in there, very little substance, and it didn't. And I started to, even in my show, started to talk more about the human aspect of money and the impact. And I'd never hidden stuff about myself, but I didn't talk about it. If you asked me, I'd tell you. But I started to share a lot more, and because people think I'm so together, and I'd say, well, if you only knew, and I would tell the story, and everything just changed. And people's, even my clients, the conversations changed, and the things they ask you, and I'm thinking, why would you tell me that? Because somewhere in there they felt safe to do it. So the boundaries, and as you said earlier on, the difference between your business and your personal, they're all one and the same, and it's the same for everybody else. So now we understand that, and I had to learn to understand that, because I was very, it's about the money and making profit, and it isn't. In fact, I've left a lot of that behind, if truth be known. And I'm starting with what's happening in your personal life that's not happening because this isn't being taken care of, right? And this is why we need to take care of it, because you can't have you constantly stressed about this and so on. So no, Tony, you have been awesome.
Thank you,
absolutely awesome. So if people want to find out more about you, assuming they can afford you, Tony, assuming they can afford you, you know, we haven't all got the Virgin credit card at our disposal. How can they get more of a taste of you? No, at first I think you're more remortgage the house, Tone, but we won't go there. But and in fact,
I've done that too. I've done that too, to really work with some of the best teachers. You know, I've done many things.
I believe you. Well, in fact, you won't remember this. I think it was when I first ever met you. I can't remember where we were or somewhere, and you said, he came up and he said, "Oh, how are you? What are you doing?" Blah blah blah, and you asked me what I was doing or something, and I said, "So what are you up to next in the world?" And I can't remember exactly what you said, but it was almost like everybody in the room would say, "Oh, I want to get to a 6-figure business. I'm going to recruit staff. I'm getting an office." And Tony said, "I'm gonna," and I'm making it up, but in contrast is, "I'm going to help 50,000 people build schools in Africa." And I'm like, it's like it was. You were way over there. And I remember thinking, looking at you thinking, no, that's what it was as well. We were asked who is on our list of people we'd like to meet.
Oh, yeah.
Remember? And we would come up with, no matter how far-fetched, and I can't remember who you came up, I can't remember if it was a prime minister, or, and we were sitting there, the
Yeah.
Thank you. You see, I'm not making it up.
No.
And
you're-
you were
you're
dead
spot
serious,
on.
and everyone was like, "Oh, I'd like to meet Tony Robbins or Richard Branson." You went, "The Queen," and it wasn't like I want to meet her. I think if I met the Queen, I could really make a difference. And I'm looking, thinking, this man is serious, and that's how you stuck in my mind. I never forgot it. Stuck in my mind.
The Queen is this year the first recipient of a Christmas gift, #loneliness.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
This is what the thing about it. You said no matter where you come from, to elevate your belief and I'm not anywhere near where you are because I still do the back forth, but I also live a life and speak to people that my background and my experiences says I have no business doing anything that I am doing.
Yeah.
So when I listen to your book and hear the things you talk about, it's like, yes, but you have to believe,
Yeah.
not just say it out loud. So what's your website, Tony, so people can go and get more of a flavor of
People can go at www.tonyselimi.com. That's TonySelimi.com. They can subscribe to my YouTube channel. They can also follow me on Twitter, on Instagram, connect with me on LinkedIn, follow my public Facebook page, because my private one is full of friends. Facebook doesn't allow you to have more than 5,000 friends. So I've got almost 200,000 followers on different pages, but they can also start reading the books, because in the books I've embedded the methodology, but also the energy and the vibration. And the books that I've written are written in a language which is timeless. And the methodology, I wanted to create a timeless piece, meaning at any point in your life, if you apply the methodology, it will bring you new levels of wisdom. And this is what my clients for the last 3 years have been experiencing. I've been using my methodology for 3 years consistently, and I've created tremendous miracles for all of my clients to bring that clarity for them to be able to really manifest their highest vision. For those people who can't afford to work with a private coach, they can start with reading the books, listen to the books, but also doing all the exercises that I've written in Path to Wisdom and answer the questions in #loneliness. And if you take any paragraph within any of my books and you take that paragraph and you work on that paragraph for the day, I will guarantee you success.
Total. That's going to be the homework. I'm already on that homework anyway, so I'll let you know how I go. But no, it's been quite eye-opening and transformational. So thank you very much, Tony. It's been such a pleasure, and I'm really pleased you could make the time, because I know you're a busy man.
Thank you so much, Georgette.
No problem.
Firm the figures, knows your money, cuts down on strife. Time to trust your future. Firmer figures, love your life.